HMTV Matters.
Welcome, everybody, to our next edition of Legacy Chronicles, honoring the past and shaping the future. I'm your host, Donna Rosenblum, and I'm here with Doron Keren, a second generation whose mom is a Holocaust survivor. And we're here to chat about some of the issues of being a 2G. So, Doron, why don't we start by talking about your mom and maybe give a little introduction about how she survived, where she was from.
Sure. Mm-hmm. So I believe that HMTC podcast is a way to teach our story. Mm-hmm. Because understanding our past and present is the key to building a better future.
Couldn't have said it better.
So with that in mind, I want to thank you for inviting me on the podcast. So both my parents were survivors. My mother's survival story is well documented. She co-authored a book with Dan Paisner, The Girl in the Green Sweater, which you can see right here, in 2011. And in 2011, the feature film In Darkness was nominated for Best Foreign Film. It was directed by Agnieszka Holland. So my 7-year-old mother, Christina, at the time, survived in the sewers of Lwów. Poland was in Poland for 14 months, together with her father, Ignacy, her mother, Paulina, a 3-year-old brother, Pavel. There were 10 survivors in total, helped by a righteous Gentile, a Leopold Socha. He was a devout Catholic Polish worker and a petty thief. But what started out as a purely transactional deal turned out to be his salvation. I also called my father, he's got an interesting story. I called him the Oskar Schindler B-list survivor. Mm-hmm. Yes, Oskar Schindler absolutely had a hand in saving my father, Marian. Schindler moved into Krakow, Poland, just 2 doors down from my father's family's townhouse. My grandmother came from a very well-off family. Having graduated from the University of Vienna, she spoke German fluently. So when Schindler visited his German officer who took up residence in my father's family flat, he would often speak to my grandmother. Later on, when my grandmother and my 7-year-old father were detained in the Piaców labor camp, it was Schindler who helped arrange their escape. There's much more to this story. We could revisit it at another session.
Another podcast for another session. Absolutely. Wonderful. So as a 2G, when did you get an inkling that your parents were not like everybody else's parents? When did you understand the concept that they were survivors, what the Holocaust meant? Do you remember this, pivotal moments?
I do. Yeah. Well, I grew up with these stories, and I was inquisitive, and their stories fascinated me. Both my parents were quite forthcoming, and so I guess I consider myself lucky. If you want to call it that.
There were many whose parents never spoke.
Right. Mm-hmm. But it was only through their documented testimony that I first heard their stories told in any chronological order. Before that, it was just like blurbs, bits and pieces, and excerpts. So as a young boy, I grew up with these stories, and I never realized how much their horrific experiences shaped their lives. So as an adult, I began to see the true nature of their PTSD. Mm-hmm. I always had to finish every last bite of food. Our refrigerator was filled with leftovers, some of them clearly past their expiration date. My mother would be triggered by sounds of rushing water. They almost drowned in the sewer. Mm-hmm. There was also a distinct thud sound that frightened her. She would tell me that it reminded her of the sound when, in the ghetto, mothers would come home after work in the labor camp, only to find their children missing. So they would throw themselves out the windows to their death.
Yeah, that's quite powerful.
Crazy stuff.
Crazy stuff. So, Wow, I just got to process that for a second. That's like really,
Everybody
really,
does.
really,
And
really, woo. So obviously you were affected by these stories, the fact that your parents were so forthcoming, and
Of course.
and how did that affect you growing up?
As a young boy, you're pretty resilient. You've got other interests. So I say I wasn't really that affected, other than emotionally, because sometimes these stories really, really, wounded me. But psychologically, overall, it didn't really affect me. I was still the same kid, hanging out with other kids, playing sports, But I think that as an adult, I started to take it seriously. I started to really delve into these stories more and more. And so, that led to everything else.
Right. Let me ask, did you have any friends growing up that also had parents that were survivors? Or were you the only one?
I think I was the only one.
All right. Yeah.
I grew up in Port. We didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
As kids, we really didn't talk about it. Even in college, we didn't discuss it. And if we did, it was pretty brief. We didn't go into detail. It was only as I would say as a father of children, and going to temple, taking into the early childhood education programs, that the adults started to share some of the stories,
Right.
that the ones that were 2Gs.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the girl in the green sweater and how that came to be.
Sure.
So when did your mom? How did this happen? Was she the one who wanted to write the book? Did somebody approach her? How did it come to be?
Well, like I said earlier, as an adult, I started to nudge my mother. I said, "You've got to put this in writing." And of course, she did interview for Shoah, and she did a few interviews here and there. But I really wanted to have her put pen to paper and document this, and not just document the incidences, just document her personal perspective on what she went through. Right. So, there was a school bus. The school bus still stops in front of my house. And that's when I met a friend of mine. His name's Dan Paisner, and he's a ghost writer. So sometime around 2007, I told Dan, I asked him, "So what are you doing? Are you in the middle of something?" He's like, "Well, I'm kind of in between books." I go, "Great. You've got to meet my mother." And he's like, "Why would I want to meet your mother?" He goes, "Because she has a story that will blow your mind." So a year later, The Girl in the Green Sweater was published. The significance of that title is that my mother wore her grandmother's hand-knit green sweater for 14 months straight while hiding in the sewer. And today, it's on permanent display at the Holocaust Museum in D.C. Yeah. So back in 1975, we're going way back now, my grandfather, Ignacy Heger, sat down in front of a Polish typewriter and wrote his memoir after 30 years from memory. And that book was published in Polish in 2011. That's the same year that the film In Darkness came out. So in 2018, I had this book translated into English. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Yeah. I absolutely was blown away. It was my mother's book, but so much more. So I decided to develop a TV series based on this book. And that's a tribute to my grandfather. And this is my passion project. This series, this date is called Yellow Darkness. It might change once it's optioned. But this is a Holocaust story that inspires. It's a hero's journey, not a victim's tragedy. Right. It's got all the elements an audience loves. It's got a hero, it's got a villain, and it has a happy ending.
Sounds great. I can't wait for that to come to fruition.
I'm
we're
both.
all ready.
Let's do it.
All right. Let me ask, when
Sure.
Schindler's List came out in 1993, how did your father feel about the film? Did he feel that it was an accurate portrayal? How did it affect? Because I know for many survivors, Schindler's List was a pivotal point where if they hadn't been speaking, they decided that their story needed to be heard. It really motivated a lot of documentation of Holocaust testimony.
So first, I want to tell you that my mother didn't see the film.
Okay.
She didn't want to. Mm-hmm. She had enough. She doesn't like watching Holocaust movies. Mm-hmm. It really cuts her deep. My father, on the other hand, it seems like water off a duck's back. I don't know why, but he watched it, and I asked him. I said, "Is this fairly accurate?" He says, "Absolutely." And there was a scene in Schindler's List where Amant Gott he was out of the window of one of the his flats. He would take a rifle and he would shoot
random Jews
in Piatsów. Mm-hmm. Well, my father was standing right next to someone who was shot.
Oh, wow.
I guess being a little boy, it was a little more difficult to aim at someone. Right. But he saw that firsthand. He saw a lot of things. And I honestly don't know how he had such thick skin. Mm-hmm. He was more than willing to share his stories. His stories was different. Mm-hmm. Everybody had a different story, but as far as Schindler's List, he said yes, that really was an accurate portrayal of the story. As a matter of fact, there was another scene where a young boy jumps into a privy. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Where you can imagine what that was like. Mm-hmm. That was his friend.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Crazy stuff.
Crazy stuff. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your involvement here with HMTC.
Sure.
And we'll talk about some of the projects that you're working on. Okay.
So by sharing my family stories, I become a living link to the past. Mm-hmm. I'm committed to educating and inspiring young minds. I feel it's my responsibility to shed light on the unbreakable human spirit and ensure that the history of the Holocaust remains an enduring lesson for future generations. As a second G, I truly believe it's my duty to carry the torch, and that flame can never go dark. Mm-hmm. So as a child of two Holocaust survivors from Poland, I was raised with these stories that were never meant to entertain, but to bear witness. The stories of unimaginable cruelty, and of impossible courage. So, today we live in an age when truth is under attack from every side.
Every side.
So Holocaust denial is no longer on the fringe. It's digital, it's global, and dangerously normalized. And this is why I do this work, not just out of love for my parents, but out of responsibility for the future.
Right.
Yeah. Each year, Jewish families around the world gather at Passover Seder to retell the story of the Exodus, right? A story of slavery, persecution, and ultimately liberation. But we don't tell it once and move on. We tell it every year because memory is survival. So to me, preserving Holocaust memory is our modern-day Exodus story. Mm-hmm. It's our sacred inheritance and our solemn duty. Mm-hmm. My hope is that by sharing these stories through words, film, TV, testimony, whatever medium we have, we build bridges between memory and humanity. That young people will not just learn about history, but will feel its urgency. That they will grow up understanding that silence is dangerous, and that compassion, justice, and truth must be chosen and defended again and again. So I do this work so that when the last survivor's gone, the truth is not.
That's right.
So that our children and theirs will know what happened and will remember. That's my shtick.
That is beautiful, beautifully said. What words would you have to someone who doesn't want to tell the story? You're very passionate. You're a wonderful speaker. This is who you are. We share this common mission. It's why we're here. It's what we do, what we believe in. But there are many that don't feel that they can do it. Would you have any words to maybe get them to think a little differently?
I think that I would tell them to give it a go. Mm-hmm. Try it.
Right.
They might like it.
Yeah.
And it might inspire them to do more and more.
Yeah.
I know that, some people, for whatever reason, maybe they just don't want to think about it. Maybe they want to put it in the past, like the survivors did.
Right. They locked it away in that little suitcase in the back of their mind. We
want to go forward.
Right.
We don't want to look backwards. But as two Gs, we've got this story to share. And it's an important lesson. And I think that, like I said, it's my duty. Others may look at it different, but I think that I get inspired by doing this, by pursuing this type of work. And so that's my message. Try it. Right. Give it a go.
Right. Yeah, it could be very therapeutic. I mean, many second generation really love telling their parents' story, and they feel that they're doing their duty, and it makes them extremely, I wouldn't say happy, but they feel blessed. They feel complete. They feel that it's what they're supposed to do. So I agree.
I also feel like if your parents are alive, if you're lucky enough that the parents are alive, it's a wonderful tribute, and it's also a great way to connect with your parents that are no longer here.
Right, exactly. So your mom is still alive. Your dad obviously has passed on.
My father passed away a couple of years ago.
Right, so you still have your mom.
I still have my mom.
Which is wonderful. How old is she now?
She's going to be 90 in October.
Are we having a big party?
Absolutely.
Good.
You're invited.
Thank you. I will be there. So that's also a wonderful, wonderful thing to think about and move forward with. So what is your, you kind of said it already, but maybe we can rephrase, what would be your message or hope for others, for students, for maybe people who just don't understand the Holocaust, don't understand what it means? What would be your message to them?
I think education is the key. It really is. And I think that in schools, they've got to teach this. They can't cut this out. For students, they've got to come to places like this. Because here, you get a visual. It's not just a passage in a book.
Right.
And of course, the ultimate is hearing testimony from someone who's actually lived it, or experienced it, suffered through it, and a 2G who's passionate about telling their parents' story, and 3Gs who are, I think, even more passionate. They've got to hear it from a person.
Right.
And it will change their outlook. I'm certain of it.
Right.
And if they hear the truth, which is so washed out, and there's so many untruths, and the stories are erased.
Right.
And if they're not getting it from history books, then they've got to get it from HMTC or right. Places like this. They've got to hear it from firsthand or secondhand from survivors and their descendants.
Yeah.
It's really important to know the truth. It's important to read history and understand that history didn't start October 7th.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And, it is very powerful to be able to hear firsthand from a survivor or a second generation. We're very fortunate here at HMTC that we're able to reach so many kids. There are many states that kids don't have access to this. So again, why we podcast, why we're doing so much digital and video is so that we can reach the masses, because it's a big concern. We're approaching a time where we're not going to have our survivors. We have a very small window. I don't want to, wish your mother any ill, but she's going to be 90. So it's a reality, and she was on the younger side. We've lost so many survivors, and we need to be ready. We need to know how we're going to handle this. We can't wait and say, oh my goodness, they're all gone, what are we going to do? That's why it's so imperative that the 2Gs get involved, that we work on the PowerPoints and the narratives and all of that, because that's what we need to do. It's just the way it is. There's no choice. It is what it is.
Yeah, and I wanted to just mention that I was working. That I was working on this PowerPoint presentation, and I used a lot of visual AI-generated images because I thought that, in my mind, visual is the way young people connect, and it just keeps them engaged, and they're not going to just nod off. Because I've been to others, and after a while,
yes,
they lose it. So I created this PowerPoint, and I thought it was pretty good, but I didn't realize until I heard from Elise, and she made a great point, and that is that there are a lot of Holocaust deniers out there. And if they see a AI-generated image, an image that wasn't real, that it'll just stoke the fire and
it can dismiss everything that you're doing.
Right. And I'm like, oh my God, I never realized this.
Right.
I never thought, who would think about this stuff?
Right. Because you wouldn't think that would be the end game.
Exactly.
That shouldn't be the purpose. The purpose should not be to say this didn't happen, to attack your presentation.
Right.
But that's the reality of what we're facing. People want to have a different narrative. They will have a different agenda. They want to,
Right.
your truth and my truth might be very different. Right.
It's fake. It's made up. And so now back to the drawing board.
Yeah, and that's okay. And that's okay, because every time, and you know what, that presentation might be useful as well in a different point. You didn't waste time or lose anything by that. It's all part of the growing process. So we always have to look at it that way. As an educator, no lesson or no instruction is ever wasted. You just improve. You get better.
Art is never finished.
That's right. So, have to look at it that way. Okay, we are coming to a close. Are there any other points or issues that you would like to share in our last minute and 40 that we have?
TikTok. I think what you're doing is great. I think what HMTC is doing is fabulous.
Thank you.
I think this podcast is a wonderful addition.
Well, that's Bernie. It's all Bernie. I can't take any credit for it.
Hats off to Bernie.
Yes.
This is a great way to reach an audience, and hopefully it'll grow and grow and grow as more people listen, more people watch. You get interesting guests.
That's right.
With something to say, and it's a way of connecting a different media and to an audience that is throughout the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
well, you
kudos,
will be
kudos to Bernie.
Right. Well, you will be back because we want to hear about your father's story,
of course,
and we want to hear about your grandfather's story.
Absolutely.
So this podcast will continue in more sessions.
One last plug.
Yes.
My grandfather's book is is being published. And should be available in January.
All right. Well, there you go. January. We're going to book it now. We're going to be podcasting with you with the launch of the book.
You got it.
All right. Thank you so
you,
much for
Donna.
coming, Doron.
Thank you
Always
for
a
having
pleasure.
me.
Love you very much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for this session. And please like, subscribe, share. And wonderful HMTV at HMTC. Love it. Thank you, everyone.